Hi, everybody. It's Friday, September 26, 2025. You've joined in HOA Forum organized by the Colorado Division of Real Estate's HOA Information and Resource Center. My name is Nick Altman. My role here in the HOA Center is the HOA Information Officer. Joining me is Amanda Lopez, the HOA Center's Program Assistant slash Registration Extraordinaire. Hi, Amanda. Also with us today is David Danaly, the Education, Communication, and Policy Manager with the division. Hey, David, good to have you with us as always. So just a couple housekeeping items before we begin today. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be uploaded to the HOA Center's website within a few days of this forum. The Q&A feature has been enabled for this presentation. So if you look to the bottom of your Zoom interface panel, you should see a Q&A icon where you have the option of asking a question. If you prefer to remain anonymous while doing so, you have the option of selecting the Ask Anonymously box. To help us be more efficient in answering your questions during this webinar, please double check to see if another attendee has not already asked your question earlier in the Q&A, so that way we're not duplicating our efforts. We're making every effort to ensure that we can continue producing these live presentations in the manner that we have been. So please help us by carefully considering whether your questions already been asked and already answered in the Q&A. Likewise, please ensure your questions are related to the topic of this HOA forum today, which is the CAM search and the pros and cons of self-management versus professional management in common interest communities. So with that, let's get into it. So I'd first like to explain who we are and what we do here. The HOA Information and Resource Center was created by statute and exists to serve as a resource for consumers to understand their basic rights and responsibilities under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, or KIOA. The HOA Center also registers common interest communities and tracks complaints. We cannot mediate or arbitrate on behalf of homeowners, board members, or community association managers. The office does not act as a regulatory program. We cannot offer legal advice or investigate or intervene in disputes that arise between homeowners or their associations. The HOA Center cannot act as an advocate. We don't assess fines or penalties, and we cannot enforce an HOA's failure to register. All of these purposes are listed on the HOA Center's main webpage. So in our efforts to carry out the mission of this office, we try our best to remain balanced, independent, and unbiased when responding to inquiries and educating the public. We also believe it's important to hear from a wide variety of stakeholders and industry participants. If you've attended our previous HOA forums here, you will know that we've hosted law firms representing community associations, law firms representing unit owners of community associations, fellow state agencies, and nonprofit corporations. We're happy today to be hosting another key stakeholder in our wonderful HOA industry here in Colorado, and that is the Community Association Manager. Community association managers can offer a wide range of services that can benefit community associations or HOAs. Today, you'll be hearing from one. Please note that this presentation is not designed to be an endorsement of any one particular HOA management company. Rather, it's our hope that you'll have left this webinar with a more balanced and thoughtful approach to maintaining and running your communities. So with that, I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker today, Danaly Howe. Danaly she joined the community management industry in 2012, quickly acquiring a passion for HOA and Metro District governance. Danaly has taught and spoken on HOA and Metro District topics since 2018, including developing and presenting education courses for board members, realtors, and managers. She holds the CMCA, AMS, and PCAM designations from CAI and is the current chair of the CAI Colorado Legislative Action Committee. Her current position is the Chief Relationship Officer at Westwind Management Group in Denver, Colorado. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, cycling, and Latin dancing. Danaly, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. And thanks so much to the HOA Center for having me. I really appreciate the ability to provide this presentation for you all. Let me just get it pulled up really quickly here, and then I will get started. All right, let me know if you can all see that. Good
Yes,
to go?
Danaly, I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so yes, the CAM search do's and don'ts. So this class is going to focus on, it should benefit everyone from whether or not you're self-managed or professionally managed. I want to help give a well-rounded view of general management of associations, and then the scope of services that are being provided and how you can best set yourself and your community up for success when it comes to looking at your management. We will be allowing questions throughout the presentation. If you have a very specific question, I may ask you to reach out separately, but I'm happy to answer broad questions during the presentation. And but I won't be able to give any legal advice. And then the presentation materials will be posted on DOOR's website within the next day or so. So you will be able to get not only this presentation, but I have another handout I'll talk about throughout the presentation. So hopefully everybody will be able to find some value in this. For our agenda, so I want to go over the pros and cons of self-management versus professional management. We all know that at the end of the day, that the people can make or break either structure, right? If you have a really good volunteer board who is very active, has a lot of expertise, or if you have a really good manager or management company team that also has that expertise. Really, either option can help you succeed. There's no right or wrong way. It just depends on your needs. So that being said, we'll look at your community's needs. Look at the different options for how to structure things. There's a variety of ways to do this. Then I want to give you some tips for creating an effective RFP, knowing your expectations, getting apples to apples comparisons for your communities, and then asking those key questions. You know, we just want to make sure that if you're talking to somebody, maybe they sound good on paper, but when you actually go through the experience of working with them, is that going to be the best option for your community? And so we'll make sure that you're asking those key questions in order to get yourself in the best possible position for management. So first, let's go over some of the pros and cons of self-management versus professional management. And this is not to say that either option is better than the other. It really just depends on personal preference and needs. So first, let's go over the pros of self-management. You know, depending on the type of community that you have, if it's a single family versus condominium, high rise, could lend itself to self-management or not. The age group of the community, younger active adults or older retired people that really can put more time into the community matters. The location of your community, maybe if it's more remote, there aren't as many access options. So these are all some things to consider when looking at self-management. So the first, and what I think is probably the most obvious pro for self-management is money, right? You don't have that management fee that you have to worry about. There's still probably going to be some ongoing costs for software, office supplies, that type of a thing. But, you know, for relying on your volunteers, you may be able to save some money. Greater board control and autonomy. So maybe you need to meet more frequently. Maybe you just would like to more active control of what's happening in the community. This can be a pro for self-management. You can be more involved, and multiple homeowners can be involved. So you'll be able to have a direct hold on the community that way. More customized and attentive service. So if you have a specific way that you want to do things, versus a professional management company might require you to do things under a certain process or with a certain scope. So this can help tailor things a little bit better to the way you want to do them. So for cons, it can be less stable, right? In either situation, the people really make this succeed or not. When you get volunteers who have lives and jobs and other things happening, it can create an unstable situation. You're relying on those volunteers and that turnover and that expertise, long-term expertise. Changes in laws can be hard to follow and keep track of. There are lots of resources like the HOA Information Center to be able to get help with that, but when you're not in the day-to-day business of it, it can be really hard to keep on top of those best practices and governance. Liability, depending on the person, there could be an exposure for theft, fraud, or lawsuits, just depending on how well managed your community is and how well your financial management is happening. Really just depends on the oversight of the community, if the board is really knowledgeable about these potential risks, if they're really involved in the day-to-day management of the community. It definitely is just something to look out for. It's not necessarily eliminated with a management company, but a management company has a reputation to maintain and does this on a regular basis and needs to stay in business, right? Less robust financial expertise, budgeting, reserves. So again, if you're just paying the bills, you're just making the operations happen, that could lead to some issues down the line where you're not maybe thinking about your long-term needs for the community. And so that is just something that could be a con in being self-managed. So professional management pros. We've got trained staff, expert advisement. These are the experts who are doing this work every single day. They are in regular training. They have designations. Really, they're held to a level of professional responsibility and ethics. And so that can be a great pro for any community who needs that. Anybody who does this as their job, right? The frequency at which you're doing these services can really help. You might have access to better technology and accounting systems. Self-managed communities can have this as well, but they can be more expensive. But management companies may be able to streamline things a little bit better due to their systems. Consistent oversight of vendors, more access to vendors and negotiating power. There are a lot of opportunities for vendors to work with management companies, maybe work with multiple communities. So it's important to just think about the access to vendors and how many vendors that a management company might be able to provide for a certain service that you need, and hold them to their work and make sure that they're being accountable to actually finishing the job up correctly if something does go wrong. Guidance on compliance and statutes. We, as managers, we get regular updates and advisement on the law. We're in the weeds of it regularly, so we can pretty easily bring to mind what the requirements for various different items is going to be. So for cons, money, right? That's kind of the main obvious one, is that professional management costs more money. Time is money, and so you can have volunteers who are taking off that burden, or you can potentially have a management fee structure that is allowing for that professional management. Now, some have extra charges, so there could be some items that are unanticipated or not budgeted for that are a con of being professionally managed. Good thing to vet with your management company here. We'll talk about later. Risk of one-size-fits-all service, putting people in a box, making them do it a very standard way, not customizing it, can be a risk of professional management. Your service can really depend on your manager, your workload, the team that is assigned to you. Really depends on their portfolio, maybe where they're located. So that can be a variable there. Potential to misalign your priorities. Maybe the board cares more about your current projects and the manager cares more about your long-term reserve funding, to try to find a balance here. When the board is the management, then that can be a lot easier to streamline. And then less direct board control. You have a little bit less hands-on when it comes to day-to-day activities. Maybe things move a little bit slower than you're wanting them to be. that can cause some issues here and there. All right, so we've talked about pros and cons, and then the board is going to be looking at that and deciding, okay, are we going to be professionally managed, self-managed? Let's look at our options. So first place to start is, let's figure out our needs. What is it that we need to really be doing as a community in order to get everything maintained, keep the reserves on track, keep the homeowners happy? So firstly, let's look at budget and reserves. We need to assess the aspects around budgeting. So obviously money is one of the major options here. Do we have the budget to support a management company or a self-managed option? What are the revisions that would be needing to be made to the budget in order to have either option? So what types of expense items do we have and amenities? What professional advisement do we need on these items? Do we have the expertise in-house in order to be able to address this? Or do we need maybe a more professional manager? Maybe we have elevators, maybe we have a parking garage, maybe we have a gate, and we just don't feel like we have the expertise to be able to take this on. Whether there's sufficient accounting oversight and accuracy. Some communities are lucky, they have a CPA, retired or whoever that might be able to take this on in addition to their regular job. They have really good, thorough, accurate accounting. They provide very transparent reporting to the community, and that's amazing. A management company, most management companies can also provide the same type of service, so you'll have to just weigh those options. Reserve funding needs, expertise needed to overcome challenges. So maybe your community is older, you have a lack of reserve funding from the last 50 years and you really needed to get on track. Management company can help to strategize that. And then look at your reserve funding needs. Is there a lot of amenities? There are a lot of components. Is there a lot of maintenance that just has to happen? And who is going to be responsible for that? Oops, I had one other item there here. 1 second. This just skipped forward. Special assessments, delinquencies, board time. All of these special projects take time. And so if these are types of projects, items that look to be in your future or current aspects, then you'll need to decide, is this worth the board's time to be able to spend on, or no, do we need some outside help to really get these things taken care of? I think money-wise, some self-managed communities can end up relying on their attorney a lot, which could end up spending legal time depending on the level of expertise, which creates challenges in and of itself as well. Okay, maintenance aspects. So look at the age of the community. We talked about the deferred maintenance aspects of the community. Maybe you're just going to need some extra help in order to get all these projects done. A general contractor can help with this. Any sort of expert in the industry can help with this. Scope of your ongoing maintenance obligations. So not even just deferred maintenance based on the age of the community, but what is the association responsible for on a day-to-day basis? Painting, roofs, playground, pool, clubhouse, or just landscaping. Maybe all you have is a detention pond. Long-term reserve project management. So, eventually are you going to have to repave all of your streets or replace all of your roofs or, remodel the clubhouse? So these are really important aspects to take into consideration. Expertise needed for various components. As we talked about earlier, things like, elevators, trash chutes, fire systems, these can get really complicated really quickly, and you'll just want to evaluate any risk associated with those things and the type of professional advice you might need for it. Capacity for emergency responses. If for after hours, weekends, board members who are volunteers may not have the capacity to be able to take on this type of a workload. Sometimes having an outside party to handle this can help with the overall workload and the needs of the community. Service needs. So we'll assess our meeting preparation and follow through. How often is the board meeting? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? Is it every month or week? And then what does it take in order to get prepared for those meetings, and the follow-up that comes inevitably from those meetings and the workload they create. Look at your records management. How much day-to-day documentation, reporting, or even existing records does the community have that you're going to need to keep in order, and use records retention policies if you have one. Time management. There is just a lot to be taken into with the day-to-day work on the community. Managing that time is really important to set those expectations, to really evaluate to the best of your ability how much time your community is going to take. Look at your internal controls and risk management. So as we talked about, risk of theft, fraud, that type of thing, even insurance, being underinsured, or items such as not being compliant with the law, or decision-making of the board. You know, recently I had a board who was going into executive session to review a budget, and that isn't permitted by law. A manager can help you, help advise you on the proper times to go into executive session, but these are all factors that need to be taken into account when it comes to the expertise and the running of the community. And lastly, homeowner communication. So who's responsible for homeowner communication? How often are you communicating? What types of items are you communicating about? What is the method of communication? Is it just a bulletin board, an email blast, a mailing, a newsletter, a flyer, you know, social events? There's a whole bunch of aspects around homeowner communication to take into consideration. Our volunteers. So take a hard look at your board capacity. Some companies, if you want a management hybrid system where the board's working on things, sometimes the board can help you to take on certain aspects of the community, but try to understand the time involvement there and your availability. Look at your knowledge of statutes, Kiowa, Nonprofit Act, Condominium Act. All of these are relevant to many communities and need to be taken into account for the day-to-day operations. Neighbor-to-neighbor conflict and disputes. Decide whether or not you want to be that party who is having to knock on their neighbor's door and say, hey, Joe over here says you have too much dog poop in your yard, or whatever it is. And do you want to be that party, or would you prefer to outsource that and have it on somebody who's not in the day-to-day conflict and having to wave hi at your neighbor every day in addition to this? Uniformity of covenant and rule enforcement. Is the board able to be unbiased and have the capacity to make sure that the entire community is following the rules and doing that in a uniform way to help reduce any potential liability that you would have by singling people out?
Hey, Danaly.
Yeah.
I had a question in, oh, that might be typing, but can you repeat what you said about executive sessions?
Yeah. So there are, I think, 5 or 6 reasons that communities can go into executive session. One recent example I came across was a board was going into executive session to talk about the budget, the draft budget, and just to review the numbers in the budget. And that is not a valid reason to go into executive session. It has to be, don't quote me on all the reasons, please go research this your own, but legal advice, personnel items, pending lawsuits or other civil, you know, or criminal proceedings, items that must be kept private for that individual, such as if you're turning an account over to collections, and maybe any other thing that's standard for executive session in that regard. But those are kind of the highlights there as to why you can go into executive session. All right, so you've assessed the cost, the services, the technology, and the compliance. So you're going to need to prioritize these items, right? Cheap, fast, and better. You can have two, right? If you want cheap and fast, it's not going to be good. If you want fast and good, it's not going to be cheap. So try to balance those items. Look at the overall, the service, the technology capabilities, the compliance, the effort and time it's going to take, and the cost that the association is willing to pay in order to have those services fulfilled. All right, so now getting more into the nitty-gritty, let's actually define the scope of services for the community in putting together your RFP. And this is really a nuts and bolts list of all of the things that you're going to want to be putting on paper for looking at a management solution. So looking at administrative support, who's going to be preparing the meeting agendas, your packets, minutes, what's the frequency of that? Who's going to be maintaining all of your records? Who's going to be providing support to committees? Is that even needed, or are the committees self-run? Are they overseen by the board? And are there any meetings related to that? What special projects are there? Who is going to be managing those projects, getting bids for those projects, making sure that the projects are followed through and then paid in a timely manner once they are completed? What type of monitoring are you doing for legislation, and who is ensuring that any documents are being updated according to legislation? And what type of staffing do you need? If your community is large enough, you may need to hire employees to help with maintenance aspects or management aspects or on-site or lifestyle aspects. For financial management, you'll need to decide who is doing the annual budgeting, who has the expertise to go look at and break down every line item to make sure that we look at historical and trending data and what that is going to need to be for the ensuing year. Oh, I apologize. I don't know what's happening with this thing here. All right, collection of assessments. Who is collecting your assessments? Who is processing your delinquency? As of the last 3 years, the collection process and the covenant enforcement process have gotten very complicated. There's a lot of different pieces that go into play here. And so it's really important to understand who is taking care of that and what's their expertise behind it. Payables, so who is paying your bills, who's reconciling the bank accounts, making sure that all of those items tie out, and then producing your monthly financial statements and accompanying reports, AR, AP, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, whatever it is that your community would like on a regular basis. Reserve investment management, so who is tracking the status of the reserve fund, investing those reserves into CD accounts, making sure that you're following any reserve study or causing that reserve study to get updated, and then the regular projects that come up from time to time. If you have any required audits, or if an audit gets voted on, tax filings that happen every year, and reserve study reporting are all important aspects to look at. For vendors, who's going to be writing your RFPs, who's going to be reaching out to vendors and providing evaluation on those contracts, and also reviewing the language in the contract. That is something that you may need to lean on legal for on a regular basis. Insurance and licensing requirements, following what's in your governing documents, looking at any potential gaps in coverage, getting quotes on a regular basis, especially with the increase in insurance that we've seen over the last few years, and helping to get competitive bids or providing options for some of those parameters you can move around in order to make insurance a little more affordable. Licensing refers to DORA and Secretary of State items that you have to do to keep compliant on a regular basis, and who's doing that. Oh, and also, sorry, this is on the vendor side, but vendor insurance and licensing as well, making sure that your vendors are current with any insurance that they're required to provide and any licenses that they're required to have, depending on the item. Who manages those vendors and ensures that they have good performance, that they're meeting the needs and the scope of services that have been agreed upon. And then the day-to-day vendor oversight and reporting. Capital project management, we've discussed, but who just stays on top of those capital projects and ensures them, sees them through to the end. All right, on covenant enforcement, who is inspecting and visiting through the community regular to check on the status of the community? And then coincidentally, then issuing violation notices that are in line with the law and governing documents. There's also a lot of new laws around this and the different requirements, timeframes, letter language, all of that is very specific. Tracking the status, issuing follow-ups where needed. Then if you get to the point of due process where somebody requests a hearing or an appeal, and who is managing that process and handling that, and who's ensuring that there is consistent and fair enforcement in this covenant enforcement process. Technology and communication. So what is the online portal and or website? What type of features is it providing? Payment and service request options. So how are owners able to make payments and request service for work orders or for any items that pertain to their property or association maintained areas? Newsletters, updates, and email blasts, how are those sent out? 24/7 emergency contact availability and how that is going to work. And then provide ongoing transparency on board actions and community activities. This goes hand in hand with email blasts, but just making sure that the community is staying informed. All right, so specifically, if you were going to be putting together an RFP, there's a few aspects you'll want to make sure to have. In your introduction, make sure you include a thorough community background. So how old you are, the type of housing, what amenities you have, provide your governing documents, at least your covenants where possible, who's on the board, what committees you have, or at least how big the board is, and the point of contact for the RFP. Detail your scope of services. That's everything we just reviewed, your administrative items, financial, vendor, covenant enforcement, technology and communication expectations, and who is handling what. So list your different requirements. So what are the qualifications of the manager or management company that you're seeking? What is their management structure? How do they actually run the business of your community? If they're providing multiple types of services like accounting, management, ongoing compliance items like covenant enforcement and documentation, what does that actually look like in the day-to-day practice? Where are they located in proximity to your community? Sometimes being an hour away from the community can cause issues depending on the needs of the community and the frequency of the site visits. What is their overall fee structure? What do they charge extra for? What are their hourly rates? Be sure to do a side-by-side comparison to this for every aspect financially wherever possible. And then lastly, look at the technology and reporting. What type of technology are they utilizing in the day-to-day operations? And how are they reporting to you? What types of reports do they provide on a regular basis? Maybe there's a monthly management report in addition to the financial report. And what types of information does that contain? Additionally, with location, look at where the company is located for each of their services, depending on if they're fully local or they may be an out-of-state company. Lastly, references and samples. You can ask for meeting minutes, management reports, financials, communication samples, wherever you feel that is needed for your community, and seek a list of references for similar communities that are going to help give you an idea of the services that are being provided for their community. All right. Make sure to state in your RFP the different timelines that are requested. If you have a list of questions for the RFP, include those in there. That is going to be the initial step. Once you provide the RFP and any questions, then expect to potentially have a site visit with any proposers to be able to review the status of the property, and any maintenance items or any large issues that are facing the community. List the proposal due date. After that, after proposals have come in, then likely you'll conduct some interviews. You may want to ask for a portal demo for their software. Then the board will deliberate and make a final decision and selection on the chosen option. Then there will be a transition date. Make sure to include this in the RFP so that there's an understanding of the urgency or not of this transition and how that process is going to work. Lastly, some tips. Be very specific. Vague RFPs lead to vague proposals. So as much detail as you can provide, really there's not too little of detail. I mean, maybe don't have a 200-page document that you provide, but try to go into some detail about what are the needs of the community, what are the top priorities of the board. Include those details in documents. So having documents that the management company or manager is able to provide are very helpful. Tailor the RFP to your needs. Take a look at all of those specific items that we talked about previously. Look at the scope. How often are you meeting? How much do you need to visit the community? How often should letters be going out? And get that really honed into the needs. And provide all your evaluation criteria up front. Tell them, hey, cost is our #1 factor here, or responsiveness is our factor here, or location. Decide what types of criteria are going to be the most important to you. Standardize the format for easier comparison. If you need to, you can even do a chart so that they must fill out certain pricing information, or ask them, hey, in section 1, include this, in section 2, include this. It will be a little bit easier to do an apples to apples comparison if you have a standard format. Where needed, use advisors, talk to legal or different experts for review, especially if there are items in your scope of service or your amenities that need outside expertise. Feel free to lean on those people to help get you aligned in the right place and make the best decision. Things to avoid: unrealistic timelines, probably the biggest one. Make sure that you can be, giving the proposers enough time to submit their information, enough time for the board to really review and evaluate, and especially enough time to be able to make a transition happen. These are all processes that shouldn't be rushed in order to make the best prudent decision for the community. Overly broad or undefined service requests. So just try to be very specific with your goals to be able to help understand what is going to lead to success in the situation. If you just say, visit the property, that may not necessarily help versus saying, we need somebody out here every week. Non-disclosure, lack of transparency. If there are big issues in the community, if there has been big issues, if there are problems, your management company is going to find that out, whoever you choose. And we do not want to be on the back end of knowing about that. Please just disclose what's happening, be upfront, because you need to be able to make sure that whoever is taking this on or whoever is coming into it, even after that item's been resolved, has the expertise to be able to handle it, is mentally prepared for any potential issues that are going to take place. So make sure that that is taken into account. And basing your decision solely on the lowest bid isn't always the best option. So do look at other factors. What is the best value based on the needs of the community? What type of customization do you need? Or is lowest really just the best option for you? And that is fine, but just be realistic about those types of decisions and what you're prioritizing. Key questions to ask and answer. So I do have a handout that will be provided on Dora's website. It includes a list of questions that the board should be prepared to answer for their potential manager or management company. And I'm not going to review that specific item here today. We have gone over a lot of those finer high-level details throughout the rest of the presentation, but that document will be on Dora's page. The second part of that is key questions to ask your future management company or manager. And that we will go over here, and then I've consolidated it into a prettier format for ease of use. So once you're in the interview process, here are some items that you should be asking your future manager. How do you select the assigned manager, and who will that manager be? So just understanding what is the process to actually choose a manager that may be the right fit for the community, or do they just select whoever, you know, may be nearby the community, or is it based on other factors? What's the typical portfolio size, management accounting structure? We've talked about the structure. What type of support is that manager getting in what they do on a day-to-day basis? What's your response time, and how do you ensure this expectation is met? This is largely the biggest complaint that at least I hear in my industry is we can't hear from anybody. So, you know, just make sure you get details on how that expectation actually is met on a regular basis. Financial, what is the invoice approval process? How often are they paid? Is this something that can be customized to the board if they want to approve 1, 2, or all board members approving invoices? When are the monthly financials issued, and what's included in the report? Is that report customized at all? How are funds segregated and safeguarded to make sure there's separation of controls and ensure that your funds are all kept safely? And then what's your fee schedule for out of scope items? If there are out of scope items, what are they, and how much do they cost? And are there costs to paying assessments? So depending on the way that you pay, if a homeowner pays by ACH or by check handling online, if you pay by credit card, debit card, if you will come into the office, can you pay by check? Is it a cash business, cashless business? These are all good questions to be able to ask to understand if there are any other potential costs when it comes to making your payment. Communication, so asking about the tools and software platform and how those communication aspects work. What does that online portal actually provide? You know, can homeowners use it as a one-stop shop to get everything you need, make a payment, look at documents, put in requests, or are those handled in different areas? What operations management reporting is provided? So does the board have easy access to those reports and information to understand what's outstanding, what's the status of it, and what's happening on a regular basis? Is that provided through your management report or other means? What's your approach to transparency, communication, and frequency? The board will set expectations to this, but also the management company may have some initial guidelines around this and how they've generally managed this as a business. Experience. So try to understand how long the company has been in business. And then based on that, what is their average client tenure and staff tenure? What sets them apart from others? That they're generally going to know how to answer this question. What's your experience with similar communities and amenities? So getting that apples to apples comparison and understanding, is our community unique in something that you haven't done before? And just try to make sure that they are going into this as something that they have experience with, if that is the board's need. What's your staff training and continuing education program? To have regular continuing education, to understand the industry, to be in the know about new laws is important. And so it's good to understand this as part of the interview process. How do you support the success of your clients and team? So what if a ball gets dropped? What if someone isn't responsive? Or how do you encourage them? How do you support them in the regular day-to-day business and as a team? It's good to understand that. And what happens if something goes wrong? Where does your team jump in to help? How do you approach issues? What do you do to mitigate any damages or problems, depending on the situation? Lastly, the transition's important, right? We want to make sure we have a good company or person that can do the management, but we actually have to get to that point. So what is your onboarding and transition process, and how do you make sure that it goes smooth? And how do you communicate with the board and or homeowners during the process? How long does it take, and how much time do you need in order to prepare for that? Are there any transition fees? There could be costs in order to make this process happen. So good question to ask. All right. So that is generally what I have for you guys today. It looks like we do have maybe about 10 minutes left for some questions. If you do want to reach out to me individually, you are welcome to do that. Otherwise, Dora's information office is available for some general assistance where needed too. So thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Danaly. That was some great information about the community association management industry and some thoughts and considerations for board members on possibly preparing a request for proposal to present to community managers for consideration. I did have a couple questions come in directly to me. I wanted to see if you and your colleague would like to answer any questions from our Q&A live, or would you prefer that I ask a couple of these that I received?
Let's go for it.
Cool. So yeah, the first question here came from an anonymous attendee, and they were wondering, or their question is, our board is considering hiring a new community manager after ending our current contract with our existing community manager. Do you have any advice for how to best handle the management transition and how to ensure effective communication across all parties? And what about the transfer of records?
Yeah, that can be a hard one, especially if there is a gap right now, if your management has fully ended with the last company and is and now you need a company. So I would definitely go back to your prior company and make sure that you have all of your records, all of your financials, anything that has been needed to be wrapped up on their side, that you have that thorough list, including any action items that are outstanding, any projects, any bills. all of that is really good to have. And if you are in a situation where you have a gap in management, it's pretty urgent. So you'll want to either take that on as being self-managed temporarily in order to get payments made so lights don't go off and things like that. To get a new management company, yeah, I mean, I would definitely just express the need for that. And, you know, if you came from, most management companies know how to do the offboarding, and they will work with any new company that you have. And they have a process for that offboarding. And so they should be able to be professional in that transition and working together. So in that way, it's not much different than any sort of a regular transition.
Got it. I did want to throw our slide up here for the HOA Center's contact information. You should be seeing that now. Another question I had, one of our attendees had is there one form of communication you prefer for board members to reach out to you? For example, email, telephone, US mail, and then also how about for the homeowners?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company and the manager, actually. Some managers do much better by email. Some managers will let the board email, call or text them even. Some companies and managers just want you to go through the online portal. So really, I think that's just a case-by-case basis on preference and an ability to provide that. So.
Great. Okay. And were there any other questions you saw in the Q&A that you wanted to try and take a stab at,
or
would you prefer just some to contact you directly after the presentation?
I want to try to answer them since we got about 7 minutes left, I believe, unless I'm going over time, but I think I can handle some of these.
Perfect.
So in addition to base charge for management company, what additive charges are there? Should we ask for a price list? What costs can be passed on to individual homeowners versus must be paid by the HOA as a whole? So it's a large question. And so you're going to want to definitely ask for those specifics. So what, you know, oftentimes things like special assessments, larger projects, insurance claims, any sort of litigation items, grant writing, stuff that's really not on a recurring basis, those are going to be things that are going to be out of scope for any sort of a manager. Do ask for that list. They should be able to provide that, or at least hourly rates. What costs can be passed on depends on your governing documents and the law. So you can pass on certified mail costs for violations. You can often pass on any, you know, private maintenance items that are in limited common elements or such. But, you know, that is a good question to just refer back to your legal documents and maybe even ask your attorney. Your maintenance and insurance chart, if you're in a condo, will specify that often as well, if you have one. Are individual managers for HOA districts hard to find? I would say so, yes, to get somebody that's without work and just looking to work only on one community, that can be hard, but I would post that as a job on any job site, LinkedIn, Indeed. You may be able to find somebody who's a right fit for that solution. What is the customary overhead for management contracts, 25% or more? I'm not certain as to what that is referring to. Potentially that could be like a project management type of question. And that really varies across the board, depending on the company. It could be hourly, it could be a percentage rate. Other than that, a management contract can really vary across the board as to how it is charged for. So. Comment on the pros and cons of on-site versus off-site. Oh, that could be an entire other presentation, I think. A lot of similarities to being self-managed versus professionally managed, but yeah, I think it really just depends on the needs of your community if that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Maybe reach out to me directly if you have a specific question in relation to that. How do we find an HOA manager that handles micro-size HOAs? I totally understand this question. and it comes up a lot. Many management companies have a minimum that just isn't going to be sustainable for a small community. And so I get that. I would say maybe at least try to find an accounting solution that can keep on top of your bills and your homeowner payments and your delinquency process, because that's a huge thing. And then see if you can get some volunteers to just manage more of the day-to-day aspects of the community. Other than that, you may be able to negotiate with a management company some lower scope of services. Maybe they can just help you stay compliant with DORA and the laws and Secretary of State. Maybe they can help you with, your annual meeting or some other more administrative aspects, and try to maybe narrow the scope down to what the volunteers can sustain versus what the management company can provide. Can a board go into executive session to discuss board nominees? That's a good legal question, but I would say generally no. I'm sorry, not for discussion. You'd probably want to have the nominees, talk about themselves publicly. Yes, you can decide that offline. You can even discuss it offline. You can even end the meeting and say, hey, we're gonna decide this over email and come back to it. Yeah, so I think generally that's okay. Do double check with your attorney just to make sure you want to do something like that. I generally encourage people to be transparent in all of their activities wherever possible. Asking member satisfaction surveys as samples of work part of the RFP. So would asking for member satisfaction surveys be appropriate to ask for, as well as samples of work as part of the RFP? It potentially, yeah, if the company has those types of surveys that they do take. I don't know if they would provide you with the actual survey responses, but they might provide you with some data on it. And then the work, certainly some redacted documents and examples could be provided as part of that. Oh man, so many questions. All right, got a couple more. Let me pick something. Thank you guys.
Yeah, we tend to get a lot of questions in our
Yeah,
forums.
many. And maybe Nick, if you could maybe save these, and that way I can at least maybe try to reach out to them or update my presentation for the future where I can. But
yeah, absolutely, we're happy to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so some of these I'm just trying to see if they're going to be relevant. Is it appropriate to have an exit strategy baked into the RFP and contract so that if the management company doesn't meet the expectation, it's easy to extract the community from the contract? That is, I mean, during the transition, yeah, that is a hard one. You would definitely want to just do your due diligence ahead of time, really look at their process, get really nitty gritty with what is the process, how do you go about it, try to understand how your current management company or management solution would be dealing with that and working together. Generally, it's not easy to just terminate a contract. There's going to be some sort of a notice provision there. You may be able to just agree amicably that, hey, this isn't working for either of us, and we think it's just better to cut ties, and hopefully that's something that you can just have a conversation about. If you need to, then get legal involved. All right, I think that we'll keep that there. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I super appreciate all the thoughtful questions you've been able to provide.
Yeah, it's right around 1 o'clock. I wanted to extend a sincere thank you to our guest speaker today, Danaly and Westwind Management, for joining us on our one of our monthly HOA Forum webinars. As previously mentioned, a YouTube recording of this presentation will be uploaded to the HOA Center's website within a few business days. Thank you again for everyone who attended. Also, just a real quick announcement, the HOA for next month's HOA Forum in October, the HOA Center will be discussing new legislation for House Bill 25-1043. So feel free to sign up for that, and we look forward to seeing everybody then. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and thanks again for Danaly and offering your expertise. We really appreciate it.
All right,
All
thank
right.
you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.